So today's session is going to be dedicated to just to give you guys an update on what is happening with the autonomy recovery service in the clouds and multi-cloud. And to start the session, we will just go with just a little refresher on what does mean zero data loss autonomy recovery service in general. The service has been around in OCI and Oracle clouds, and now it's in multi-cloud for the past some years. So we already have a pretty good track record. It is a dedicated arm to protect Oracle database running on the Exadata database dedicated service and it's a basic service, BaseDB. And we specifically developed this solution in the coordination with database services just to provide complete automation. So we have effectively services having complete handshake on the control plane resource level to allow us to give you the capability of the zero data loss recovery. So what does it mean? It means real-time transaction protection with the so-called real-time redo transport. So this is unique in the industry. There is no competitive offering similar to what we do. But what it does, it allows you to protect your database until the last known transaction in the system, not for the data guard, not for the disaster recovery practices, but for the backup and recovery practices. And it also allows you to restore to the last known transaction in the system. God forbid something happens to the primary database. At the same time, we provide continuous data anomaly detection and recovery validation. We'll talk about it a little bit later. It is a part of the ransomware protection. It is extremely popular, and there are a lot of questions that we casually get from customers and our sales, like what is actually the level of the ransomware protection that we can offer with this service. And next part is obviously the space efficiency. Another unique factor about this service is the new technology that was specifically developed for the Oracle Cloud, because as you know, in Oracle Cloud, all databases that are deployed are mandatory to be TD encrypted. TD is transparent data encryption. This is a tool that is basically mandated for all the cloud deployments that we have. And we're also going to talk about it a little bit later, what does it mean to the recovery service and how it is actually affecting the backup and restore practices. And last and not least, the immutability and ransomware resiliency. This is also a new chapter in the recovery service, even though that most of the features were available for a long time. Nevertheless, we recently improved this approach and we provided immutability not on the storage level, but on the service level, which is again unique in the industry by itself. We do provide certain capabilities for the logical error gap on the backup infrastructure. So that basically becomes the default ransomware solution for the database deployed in the OCI and multi-cloud. So the first kind of recap of the news. I keep mentioning multi-cloud. What does it mean multi-cloud? If you're not really aware, the first agreement that we closed was with Azure, the Microsoft Cloud, meaning that we had sufficient demand by the customers that currently using Azure data centers for the public cloud offering. And because of the inability to deploy or Exadata technology in Azure data centers, this demand basically created a unique opportunity for Azure and Oracle to provide Exadata capabilities inside of the Azure data centers. So effectively, what you have as the infrastructure, network, storage, the compute, the Exadata hardware platform, being deployed in the Azure data centers themselves. It is really amazing opportunity to both parties. It provides the technology that is not available outside of the Oracle ecosystem, and at the same time it satisfies the requirements by the customers that were not capable to maintain their SLAs by leveraging the traditional infrastructure, the service of platform as a service in the public clouds. So that happened about a year and a half ago. We have a lot of data centers already deployed. And the second part that have followed the first part, meaning Exadata deployments, was to adoption of the recovery service as a part of the deployment in the airline data centers. There are a lot of reasons to it. The reason number one is the recovery service itself is actually utilizing Exadata platform as the storage part. So when we deploy Exadata in Azure data centers, effectively we put software on the top of the Exadata, and that becomes recovery service. So capability not just to host Exadata infrastructure and database and VM clusters running in Azure data centers, but also to host the recovery service by itself that is also running in the alien data centers. So therefore, data do not leave alien data centers. So there is no kind of necessity to really run backups to OCI here from the Exadata platform hosted by Azure. Exactly the same applies to Google. GCP followed the tune a little bit later, and that was announced last year. And we started deploying exactly the same practices in the Google Cloud platform, GCP, meaning the same Exadata, meaning the same recovery service running effectively in the Google data centers. And so the last but not least is AWS. It didn't take long to have AWS joining the partner agreements. So this agreement was announced just recently, and it will be reiterated during the next Cloud World. We do not have currently the recovery service running in the AWS data centers. Hope it will happen pretty soon, but today there was a capability to back up Oracle database running in AWS to the host in OCI. And like I said, hopefully they're going to follow the tune, and we will be able to deploy recovery service in AWS data centers themselves. So next chapter of the news. Let's talk about prerequisites. So like everybody hates prerequisites. It is not fun. And when you start deploying recovery service in your tenancy, there is a fairly substantial laundry list. Like it's not really big, kind of the watermark to accomplish, but nevertheless, it is really annoying. So a few mandatory requirements. Number one is database version. Currently, we have, not currently, but in general, we demand a 1916 version or later, or 23.4 or later. It is driven by the fact of the integration that I already alluded to. We are integrated with the Exadata client infrastructure. So the earlier versions cannot be supported just because of the inability to backport to the earlier versions. The same actually applies to the security constructs and TD encryption practices and some other stuff, but bottom line is 1916 or later. For the real-time protection is 1918 or later. Then you have to add specific policies to the database service for the recovery service communication and controls, and also some additional security policies for the multi-cloud, because in the multi-cloud universe, we need to also communicate with billing, not just the infrastructure. So effectively, because we use billing from Azure or GCP or AWS, we need to know that we're allowed to do the billing using the subscription that is available in multi-cloud. So net-nets, this got to be done. Typically, it requires security teams just to chime in, just to help to set it up on the tenancy root level. It is not a big effort, as I said, but it's still kind of an effort. And we also need to configure the subnet and register the backup subnet with recovery service. This part is a little bit more tricky depending on the network settings. The reason why we need a dedicated subnet is pretty simple. We use IPs from the dedicated subnet to communicate with the source database. We use Oracle proprietary technology, which is called private endpoint. This is the most secure way to communicate with the host. And we utilize IPs from the dedicated subnet to deploy these private endpoints inside of the client system. And of course, you need a couple of ports. So 2484 and 8705. One is for SQL, another one for DataPath. Again, nothing really complicated. It is extremely straightforward. Sometimes it gets a little bit complicated because of the network security group, NSGs, or the security list being involved in the equation, so it still needs the network guys to chime in. It needs security guys to approve all the changes and energies. So bottom line, it is still a liability. The last but not least is the database got to be encrypted. It is a part of the same security and ransomware protection that we have in both Multicloud and OCI. And the database got to be encrypted on the table level, not just with the basic master key. So what happened to all this laundry list for the prerequisites? One is, yes, this one is maintained. So you still need to upgrade to 1916 or later. This is not going to kind of go away, as I said, so just make sure that you patch your database to the recent levels. And we know that not a lot of customers running on the earlier releases of database service, but nevertheless, once in a while, we do bump into this. There is also a couple of the parameters like compatibility marker in the database settings itself that's got to be updated. So sometimes people forget about compatibility parameter because the migration and upgrades to the later in the releases unfortunately do not touch this parameter. So when the system says that compatibility marker is not updated, so it still will reject the backup stream. This one goes away. So security policies are being deployed now automatically. So it is a pretty much straightforward process. And so most importantly, it doesn't involve security guys to help you to set up the IAM policies. The next one is the configuration of the subnet, which goes away again. It's going to be done automatically. The subnet is going to be automatically deployed and registered with the recovery service. The CIDR block size is recommended /24, meaning that we need that many IP addresses for communication between the client and the host of the recovery service in the backend. So it does mean that you cannot touch it. Everything is customizable. It doesn't mean that we basically impose. We basically just project that, listen, if you want to do it the easy way, this is how it's going to be done. Otherwise, you can always take over. And if you have some complicated networking with DNS resolvers and some of the stuff that we see pretty often, you can take over the process. You can design it to your own liking. You can make sure that the subnet dedicated is going to be deployed to your liking and in accordance with the corporate practices. Open ports, we cannot do that. Why? Because it is a part of the generic Oracle stance that we do not compromise security for our clients. You guys control the ports. You really need these ports to be open for us for both ways, for the egress and the ingress. Nevertheless, we cannot do this for you just for the same very reason. We do not want to interfere with the security practices that you currently have in place. So it is your decision. Nevertheless, the recovery service still requires to open the ports in both ways and to accommodate it in the security group energy or security release settings. And of course, this one is not going away. We do need fully TD encrypted source database to be onboarded to the recovery service. Next good news is we basically designed recovery service as the universal vehicle for everything backups for database deployed in public cloud. It is priced absolutely identical to the old practices which are related to the object storage backups destination. And it was done intentionally to make sure that the business is not going to be disrupted, so just because of the price point difference between the old practice and recovery service. But the service itself was designed with the basically expectation that the service becomes the default. It is much smarter. It is way more efficient. It provides much higher SLAs than anything in this industry. So there was absolutely no reason for us not to consider that sooner or later the old practices related to the object storage are going to go away. This is exactly what starts happening. It's going to be a gradual rollout process. Nevertheless, if you're going to go to the updated XDB dedicated documentation, you will see an update saying that's 3 regions in OCI, Frankfurt, Narita, Japan, and Phoenix, already not going to be acknowledging or allowing to select object storage as the backup destination for the new tenancies. So for the old tenancies, it's still going to be grandfathered, so we're not going to be touching it for now. But for the new customers or new tenancies that you guys are going to be rolling out, you will not see drop-down lists as a backup destination that is going to be enabling both object storage and recovery service. Going forward, only recovery service is going to be available. Again, from all the practical reasons and purposes, there is absolutely no reason for Oracle as a company to maintain both backup destinations for the OCI and multi-cloud. So this is just a starting point. Like I said, we're gradually going to be shutting down the rest of the regions, including multi-cloud regions. But for now, for the moment being, we started with these 3 specific regions. Again, if you already have services running in OCI and multi-cloud, it will not affect you immediately. But keep in mind that from all the practical purposes, the recovery service is the default vehicle, and we definitely strongly recommend to consider switching it if you're still using the old object storage-based backups. So let's talk about cyber resiliency. So I brought it up, and the reason why I decided to do like a little semi-refresher, because of a couple of things that we developed just recently and released recently, but also to remind, because we run into this conversation about what can we do for cyber resiliency in cloud and multi-cloud. A lot of customers migrate from on-premises to public cloud for this specific reason, because they simply cannot maintain or satisfy either the industry regulations, the government guidance, both of them. A lot of things that happened for the past couple of years. One was the SEC new regulation that was adopted by the US government. You probably know that. That actually includes a lot of mandatory reporting. One is the Form 10K, which basically says that you as a business have to provide to SEC complete response of how your business responded to the ransomware protection, which becomes mandatory. The same happens in Europe, and so you probably know these DORA requirements just recently being enforced as of this year. They gave 2 years of the grace period for businesses to adjust and adopt, but nevertheless now it's enforced, and basically both SEC and DORA regulations impose pretty good strain on the business owners, because they can be held liable if they do not provide adequate coverage for the ransomware. So again, this subject becomes extremely hot, extremely important. People basically come to us and say, okay, competition can do X, Y, Z. Can you guys do something like that? Can you really do anomaly detection? Can you really deliver the kind of necessary tools in the toolkit that can help with mandatory requirements now imposed by both US and European markets? And so the same actually happening all over the place. It's not just Europe and the US. The same being adopted in Australia. The same is coming from New Zealand and a lot of other countries. So because of this kind of persistent conversation, we have updated documentation, because oftentimes the number one request from customers is, okay, so you have these awesome tools, but can you actually give me something that I can share with my CISO team to tell them that we actually have the sufficient level of resiliency in the cloud and multi-cloud that is provided by the recovery service. So we updated the documentation with the chapter, as you can see, the recovery service is immutable cloud service. And I will explain what does mean immutable service in just a second. Why do we say that we are immutable on the service level, not on the storage level? And so I published my blog. You can look it up. It's just search Google for the Alex Goldblatt blog for the immutable Oracle Zero Data Loss Anomalous Recovery Service. It has a little bit more myths than documentation. I did my best to basically elaborate on what do we offer as a company, because the essence of the security constructs and recoverability and ransomware protection go hand in hand with a lot of constructs that are available in the OCI as of the overall cloud framework. So instead of just going to the kind of isolated singular, which is typical for the industry, saying that, okay, I'm immutable on the storage level or something of this nature, we took 10 steps further and we said, okay, what is going to take for us to call this service as the immutable service and to become the part of the unified layered schema for the ransomware protection in OCI and multi-cloud? As you can see on the slides, and I have both links to both sources available. So what do we mean by immutable service? Because it's a little bit so weirdly sounding term. But nevertheless, we felt like really compelled that we deserve to explain what do we mean by the immutable service, because we have so many layers inside of this term. So let's start by saying pretty obvious, I think, again. So cloud services are managed with absolutely different paradigm. Cannot be compared to the on-premises. On-premises is you own the infrastructure. You have access to the infrastructure. You can potentially compromise access to the infrastructure. You can potentially say that my credentials were stolen, and whoever got into my environment, they gained access through the internal network to the most precious assets in my enterprise, meaning backups. And so then somebody can encrypt it with their own keys, and they will shut down like any potential capability to the recovery. So we have exactly the same issues. We have exactly the same set of the requirements. We just have absolutely different tools to accomplish this purpose, meaning protection from the alien intrusion into the most important assets in the enterprise. First and foremost, you cannot detach, as I already mentioned, recovery service from the overall fundamentals in OCI. So we have a specific set of practices which are developed by the maximum availability architecture and maximum availability security. It is a mandatory tool to comply with. So inside of the system, we have to prove constantly to the security parties that we actually are complying. So every feature set that we release, every update, everything that we do in the system is fundamentally bound by the rules that are reported to the security parties, and then they go to the industry leadership and government parties just to prove the point that we actually are completely compliant. For instance, as you know, Oracle has specific data centers dedicated to the government and the most secure environment. So we basically mandatory have to provide the full report and proof, test proof, that we actually have this accomplished. Next one that I already kind of touched on, the encryption. Okay, so again, it is a mandatory for the Exadata clouded customer, which is on-premises solution for the private cloud, as you know, and OCI and multi-cloud. The difference between recovery service and any other party, whether you're talking about rubrics of this world, or Cohesities or net backups, it doesn't really matter. What we do, we actually exist inside of the encrypted database. So we have this unique ability to really understand that there's no much difference for us between the TD unencrypted and the encrypted database. We can handle both. The only difference is, again, that encryption is mandatory in the cloud. It is not the case for the on-premises. You can say that I will not turn TD encryption at the source because I use third-party providers, and so they cannot handle encryption. It's going to drive the cost, and it's going to drive the performance metrics way down. It is a pretty badly constructed approach, because what is happening, you compromise the most critical parts, the source, right? So we do not allow this. We demand encryption. the recovery service will reject backup if it is unencrypted on the table level. We verify that it is not just a master key, but also on the table level, as I mentioned. And what is happening next, we just accept TD encrypted data as the backup target. We do not touch encryption. We don't know about the keys. You own the keys, you own the key management. It is absolutely not shared with the backup and the recovery. We do not store keys along with the backup data. It is absolutely no-go. It would be just like to offer a car and the keys in the engine running to a Zwift, right, that wants to steal the car. So definitely we do not do this, but what we do, we maintain a correlation between the TD keys, wallet management, and backups because you need it for the restore. Client knows how to associate it, so when time comes and you need to restore your data, the client provides with the keys, they are verified against the ownership of the backup data themselves, and here you go, you can restore, you can clone, you can do whatever you need for your business necessities. The same applies to the long-term retention. Archive data are also encrypted with the same TDE keys. Client system is smart enough to maintain relevancy and association of the TDE keys between the archived data. We support up to 10 years today. If necessary, we're going to extend, but the system is smart enough to know that I need TDE keys to be retained for 10 years. It is done automatically. It is absolutely awesome tool. And like I said, this is the best way to protect your data because you do this at the source, and we basically just carry it over to the backup and archive practices without compromising, without re-encrypting, without touching your data. That can cause like anyhow exposure to the bad actors. So I covered already this one. Again, we maintain source database TD table level encryptions throughout the backup lifecycle. So next one is let's talk about what is done on the recovery service sites, right? So the previous slide was basically elaborating on what is relevant in the greater OCI public cloud or multi-cloud to the security practices that basically are imposing a specific set of features upon the recovery service being the native part of the native public service available for our customers. For those that don't know, one of the critical difference between the old practices with the Oracle object storage backups and extremely important in this universe when your tenancy might be potentially compromised. Everything can happen, so this is just not really kind of good way to think about it, but nevertheless, you really have to answer this question: what is going to happen if my tenancy is compromised? If you use object storage of the past, the ownership of the object storage bucket belongs to the tenancy. Moreover, the network connectivity is hinging on the public gateway, which is easily compromisable. Why? Because it is a public network and it is not like a designated, isolated network that we use with the private endpoints that I already alluded to. To make it even more secure, we took any accessibility of the recovery service which is being managed inside of the Oracle tenancy. It is not exposed to the customer tenancy at all. So the only access routes between the source database and your tenancy and the backend of the recovery service is only private endpoints, which is practically impossible to compromise. Even if you somehow going to compromise and deploy private endpoints in some other way outside of the client infrastructure that we automatically maintain to communicate with the database itself, it's still not going to do any good because we have security practices, we have rotated passwords, so we have the security constructs on the specific user management that actually is in charge of the communicating between the client and the backend. Bottom line is the fact that we isolated the tenancy, the backup data from any external access is extremely critical to the definition of the immutability of the service. So not just storage, not just air gap, not just the things that are being promoted by competition, but what we did, we completely isolated anything that is related to the most critical part, meaning your backups from the accessibility from the primary environment. To enhance it further, we also adopted deployment schema, which is hinging on the HA pairs. So in the backend, I already mentioned that we are running on the Exadata platform. And we basically put our fancy software, and then it becomes recovery appliance engineering system. And we deploy it in the pair schema to make sure that whatever might be happening in the HA pair, that we're going to be able to fail over to the secondary and not to disrupt availability of the backups or connectivity between the client and the host. There is a technical brief that you can see. I embedded the link, hyperlink, basically just explains what is happening with the air gap technology that is provided out of the box by the recovery appliances. So bottom line is, even within the isolated environment, we add additional layers of the isolation. So maintenance or hardware failures or like any critical events that would be impairing your backup practices do not apply to us. We provide 6 nines resiliency, and we also use our own homegrown technology, which is called backup anywhere. So if one of the appliances in the pair goes down for some reason, the client automatically switches over to the secondary one without losing connectivity. Your restore or backup will not be disrupted, even in the case of the critical event. RBACs, not exactly recovery service specific construct, as you can imagine, right? So this is available for the public and multi-cloud. Nevertheless, we allow you to control with the security policies that are tailor-made for you to define who can access your backups, who can run backups, who can run restores, who can do like all the operations, who should be just a reporter without any capability to alter the retention settings or something like that. So this is why we kind of outlined that RBAC is also specific to us in a sense of providing you the complete control over the environment settings on the administrator level. Again, there is no such a super administrator that can access backup data straight up, again, because the environment is completely isolated. But for your management's sake, for the practices that you might have adopted in your corporation, we definitely provide a complete toolkit to isolate accessibility for the backup environment even further. Another one is really critical. Not necessarily all businesses in this world for the on-premises mandated to comply with the government regulations and compliance rules. This doesn't apply to us. Oracle is a business. We are mandated, so there is a specific website, it is publicly available, you can look it up, that lists all the government regulations that we have to be compliant with. Otherwise, we would not be able to maintain public cloud as the business as a whole. So it is not just government regulations, it might be, I don't know, regulations in Dubai, it might be regulations in New Zealand, right? So we just have to go and jump through all the scopes just to maintain applicability of the business deployment in all these countries, because we really have to prove that we are compliant with the mandatory requirements, not just US, not just Europe, just worldwide. Another one is additional level of isolation. Everything that we do is controlled by the policy engine. The delete workflows are disabled. You cannot connect to the Armin catalog and to run delete commands. It's not going to fly. It will just error out. And it is, again, done specifically to enforce the notion of the mandatory regulations. Because if you have a business and you have to show to your CISO office that you have complete immutability, you really have to prove the point that there is no any accessibility point to the backup universe that actually would allow some rogue actor to delete your precious backups. Because again, the backup is the last bastion, right? So this is the last level of defense in your IT department, because if you can recover any ransomware attack, any rogue actor that goes disgruntled employee, deletes all the primary databases, if you can restore, it is still not going to work. You're going to be capable of full recovery without compromising your production environment. And to enhance it even further, the only critical point in the business that is available to you as the administrator is the retention management. So to block even this point in the environment, which becomes the only realistic point that can be kind of modified or to decrease, and the rogue actor can go and just say, okay, so I have retention, and so I have 35 days of the retention, which is mandated, or like as you can see on the screen, 26. And so I go in the hash and I modify it to the minimum of the 14 days, and so therefore I'm going to compromise my business because it's going to be out of compliance, or you will not find your backups from 20 days ago. So to block even this access, we created an additional checkbox in the policy which says enable retention lock. What does it mean? We lock the retention management on the policy level. So all databases that are associated with the locked policy are going to be automatically locked for the retention purposes. So what it does, you can increase retention, you cannot decrease retention in the locked policy. You cannot move database outside of the policy. The enforcement of the retention management comes even though, so we block basically just any alteration of the retention. So there is a specific option that is available otherwise on the database side that you can choose. Usually it's been used for the test dev environments, saying that if my primary database is deleted, I can delete backups within 72 hours instead of the retention. If you enable retention lock, this option goes away. Everything becomes managed by the retention policy and retention settings in the policy. As I said, we do allow increase, but there is no decrease. And to make sure that you didn't make it by mistake because it's so restrictive, we provide 14 days grace period. And so you're going to get a persistent message asking you, did you really mean it? Or maybe it was a mistake. Maybe you didn't really want it. Maybe somebody else did it and you never approved it. So we provide 14 days just to change your mind. After 14 days, it becomes locked. And so the next question that we routinely get is, okay, can I go to support and say, I need to unlock it? The answer is absolutely not. Because otherwise, what actually good of the retention lock being as a part of the mandatory and immutable environments if you still are allowed to modify anything like that? Because again, we don't know if it is done by mistake, we don't know if it is done intentionally. So we basically allow you these 14 days to change your mind, otherwise the environment is going to become completely locked. Restrictions. Again, there is no super admin in the system. So once it is locked, the restriction is going to be applied to all users. It doesn't matter like what can be the admin settings on the RBAC, on the role-based access controls. You will not be able to modify a locked environment. So let's talk just really quick about the anomaly detection, because this is again this really important part of the ransomware play. The typical conversation that you might run into is like, okay, so my environment is compromised. What actually can be used as the indicator that my backup is still good and my backup was not compromised? We are running on the core recovery appliance technology. And what we do, we started from the very top, meaning the database itself, the client itself. As I mentioned, we live inside the database, so we know how to deal with it. We know how to figure out what are the changes in the database on the block level. We use the block change tracking mechanism on the front end for both optimization and the kind of leveraging the same for the purpose of the verification. So the first point is at the client. We basically run identical to backup validate process on the block level before we send blocks to the host as the backup target. So we know the blocks, we know how to validate the structure, we know how to segregate empty table space versus used table space. We know how to do this and to validate the checksums and the structure of the database on the front end. If we see that the validation process fails, what we're going to do, we're going to shut down backup immediately. We will not even attempt to run backup to the host. Then comes even better part, and then we start checking in the Prerequisites. Then we start checking on the host itself when we land backup blocks on the target. We verify again that all the block checksums are correct, that all data files are available for the restore. And effectively, we also run the backend cadences to validate the recoverability, identical to the restore validate. So there is a persistent process which is running every 24 hours at the host. So in the traditional universe, the only realistic way that you can validate that your environment is stable, you need to restore your backup. You restore, then you run rman validate for the restored database, and then you know that it is good. So we do this automatically for you. You don't need to do anything more than that. You just have it as the add-on bonus because, again, we own database, we know how to handle it, we own rman, and we know how to handle it. And if something happens, we will revalidate again on the disk. We effectively keep not just a singular copy, we keep multiple copies. In the cloud, we keep 4 copies. So there is a pretty good chance that if the environment was compromised, that one of the copies is going to be good to go. And again, it's got to be automatically validated by the system for the recoverability. And we do exactly the same for the archive data. We validate archive data before it's getting shipped for the archiving purposes to the object storage or for ZFS system for the on-premises. And we do exactly the same with the secondary appliance in the HA pair. Because they communicate with each other, we do exactly the same for the replication transit, and then we revalidate on the receive for the secondary host. So bottom line is we combined the best practices of this world, and we created a much more reliable ecosystem for the ransomware protection compared to everybody else. Everybody else, they run the basic analytics saying that, oh, my backup is much bigger than I anticipated, so maybe it's compromised. It is not good enough. Much bigger that might be consolidated warehouse because you consolidated yesterday 5 database and the new warehouse becomes 5x bigger. So we will be able to validate and to say, oh, it's just a warehouse, it's just increasing the size. The other guys are going to be flagging it as a fault and will shut down your backup, flagging it as the compromised backup. It doesn't apply to us, again, because we live in some database. We know there's been good database versus bad. And all the validation errors are alerted for the administration insights of OCI and Multicloud. We have a special contract. We have one is the event manager that we feed events in the system. Another one is the specific metrics. It's called Metrics Explorer. We feed appropriate information to the Metrics Explorer, and you can set up to your liking automated notifications, alerts, events, alerts for events for the health check if database shows that backup are compromised and shows like warning or the critical state. So just a couple of really quick ones about the additional resources. So I mentioned that I published a couple of blogs on the security constructs. So that's the ones that flagged in the vault. One that I already mentioned for the security practices with the recovery service. Another one is specific to DORA. Most of the businesses in Europe are dealing with America, and they have to comply with US requirements. The same applies to the American companies dealing with businesses in Europe. So we see a lot of parties, especially global companies that have global presence, they have to comply with the DORA regulations. So I provided the rundown for the DORA regulations and try to explain like what is applicability of the specific DORA chapters inside of the regulations to what should be done or should be used for the backup and recovery practices. And so this is just the set of the additional resources for your consumption. So that's the product pages and also the documentation and some additional blog capacity that we basically maintain inside of the OCI. And just to wrap it up for now, for this session, next session for the office hours are going to be dedicated to the upcoming Oracle AI World 25. Don't be surprised, it's a new term, Oracle AI World. So instead of the old Oracle Cloud World of the year 24, not 23 and before, now we call it Oracle AI World, and just to assert the notion that Oracle is the AI leading company in this world. So again, Oracle AI World, get used to this term. And next session is going to be dedicated to this event, and we will give you complete rundown to the sessions and events that are going to be available for both on-premises recovery appliance and cloud recovery service. And that's the wrap. Unless we have any questions, just I don't see anything. Do we have anything in Q&A? No open questions in Q&A. So unless you guys are gonna put anything in Q&A in the next minutes, we will wrap it up. I wish you a great day, great evening, great night, wherever you're residing. Thank you so much for your attendance and your attention to this session. Take care.